Hi there, and welcome to Backstage with Speaking Your Brand. I'm Carol Cox, founder and CEO of Speaking Your Brand and host of the Speaking Your Brand podcast. I am so excited to bring to you today three of our recent Thought Leader Academy clients who are going to share with you for the very first time a 10-minute version of the signature talk that they've been working on with us. And interestingly, even though it was random as far as who was in this group and who's going to be in the second group who will be sharing their signature talks this coming Thursday, August 1st, is that the three women who are going to be sharing their talks today, again, different industries, different topics entirely, but the common element is about trust, which seems to be a quality in short supply. Yet trust is essential to having good relationships, whether that relationship is with your colleagues, your neighbors, your audience, or even with yourself. So as you listen to these three women share their signature talks, think about how this idea of trust, it comes through in their presentation and how it can apply to you. And we would love to have you interact with us in the chat along the way, answer any questions that they have, and also cheer them on. And then after the three of them are done sharing their 10-minute version, we're going to have a roundtable where we're going to talk about what it was like to put together their talks, to develop their frameworks, to integrate their stories, and to work with us in the Thought Leader Academy. So let me introduce very quickly to you the three women we have here. We have Ambreen Ben-Shmuel, who is a PhD candidate in sociology, and she researches organizations at the nexus of political conflict and the climate crisis. Betty Graham is a former executive with over 3 decades of experience. She's now the CEO of her own company, The Inside Edge, where she focuses on leadership development and strategic optimization. Stephenie Hoehndorf is the founder of Hercelium, a community launching this month, built for women to connect, grow, and expand their careers. And Stephenie also has over 3 decades of experience in customer operations. All right, so we're going to welcome to the stage our first presenter, Ambreen. So I'm going to go ahead and load up her slides, and she can take it away.
All right, thank you, Carol. There we go. Take a look at these images. What do they have in common? At first glance, not much, but each of these represents a passionate divide in our culture. Raise your hand if you've ever had a strong opinion about any of these. Gryffindor or Slytherin, pineapple on pizza, is it delicious or an abomination? Coke or Pepsi, dogs or cats, iPhone or Android. These seemingly trivial differences can spark passionate arguments. But why? Why do we feel so strongly about our preferences for fictional characters, pizza toppings, or smartphone brands? Now, imagine these divisions amplified and applied to issues that shape our society, our politics, and our very lives. How many of you have found yourself in a heated debate about politics, social issues, or global conflicts? And how many of you have ever been at a loss for words, shocked at how different someone you know well thinks, and perhaps unsure what to say or how to say it? 70% of people say that America has become so polarized it can no longer solve the major issues facing the country. Over the past several years, Democratic and Republican presidential voters have noted that they believe Americans who strongly support the other side are a clear and present danger to the United States. 87% say that political polarization is a threat to America, and that same number, 87%, say that they're tired of political division. There's so much that divides us, but the real challenge we face isn't the fact that we have different perspectives. It's learning how to navigate them in a way that maintains respect, fosters productive dialogue, and preserves our relationships. I'm an organizational sociologist, which means that I study the structures, cultures, and dynamics outside and inside organizations that influence behavior, performance, and relationships. And in my work, I focus on extreme contexts. On top of that, I'm also a peace activist with over 20 years of involvement in one of the most polarized areas in the world. And over the years, I've learned a lot about navigating tensions and conflicts. Through my work in peace building in the Israel-Palestine context, I've seen my share of heated discussions and political divisions. But these past 10 months have been the most extreme. Whether it's news from there or your news, we're seeing minute-by-minute coverage, and it comes so quickly, you can't always fact check. You don't know what's entirely accurate, but whatever it is, it's bad, and it just keeps coming. I've found myself having even more conversations than usual with friends and colleagues as we're all caught up in this firestorm of information, hurt, and emotion. And I've often had to remind myself not to respond with my gut or with accusation or dismissal, but to return to the ABCs of engaging on polarizing political issues. Drawing on my experience, I'd like to suggest what I call the ABC framework: approach with curiosity, be present with empathy, and cultivate respectful disagreement. These are steps that I try and follow in tough conversations, especially where I value the person in front of me and want to build and maintain a relationship despite our differences. But this framework doesn't just apply to one situation. It's relevant to many contexts, and it provides tools to help navigate tough conversations in contexts of polarization. So first, approach with curiosity. When we approach conversations with genuine curiosity, we open ourselves to new perspectives. We move from defending our position to exploring others. In the midst of the recent war, I found myself in a heated exchange with an old friend and a former peace activist who held a very different view of what was happening. And after going back and forth for a while, I took a deep breath, which is always advisable, and I asked, "Can you help me understand your perspective?" The shift was swift. The tension was still there, but it took it down a notch, and we could actually better exchange ideas and discuss the intentions behind certain things that were said. But sometimes, especially in the moment, it's hard to know what to say. So here are a few phrases I found that can help us approach a situation with curiosity. It can be, like I asked her, "Can you tell me more about your perspective on this? I'm really interested in how you see this. How did you come to this conclusion? And could you help me understand your point of view better?" This can help us engage in what conflict and mediation expert Peter Coleman calls complexity priming, which is how we help ourselves and others see issues as more nuanced and multifaceted than they might first appear. The next step is to be present with empathy. As Brené Brown says, empathy has no script. There's no right or wrong way to do it. It's simply listening, holding space, withholding judgment, emotionally connecting, and communicating that incredibly healing message of "you're not alone." When there's polarization, we perceive there's a big threat. And when the person in front of us is on the other side of it, when they're part of that threat, it can be hard to move toward understanding. Being present with empathy means continuing to be curious while acknowledging the gravity of the matter for the other person. It means offering a genuine expression, such as, "I can see how the situation is difficult for you. Your feelings are valid. I'm here to listen. And I can tell this really matters. Thank you for sharing that." At the same time, while of course we all have the capacity to change and refine different perspectives, sometimes we'll simply never agree. And that brings us to C, cultivate respectful disagreement. Disagreement is natural and can be productive when done respectfully. It's about understanding the reasoning behind differing viewpoints without trying to win the argument. And especially when we're talking to someone we love, sometimes we have to remind ourselves why we like them, what we do share, and that's often much deeper and more important than what we don't. So how can we cultivate respectful disagreement? Here are some phrases that I found helpful to this process. I see we have different views on this, and that's okay. Even though we disagree, I value your opinion and appreciate this discussion. It's important to me that we both feel heard, even if we don't agree. And sometimes, if the conversations get tough, you can buy yourself time and say, "Let me think about that," and come back later. We don't have to ignore our differences to have a relationship, and we don't have to agree in order to care. Now, it's crucial to remember that while this framework can help navigate difficult and polarizing issues, it's not a cure-all. There are times when we encounter misinformation or disinformation, and it is worth pushing back, not just to clarify, but to verify. And other times we need to take a step back and give each other space. It's not about being perfect, just human. I encourage you to try this framework in your next tough conversation. By approaching with curiosity, being present with empathy, and cultivating respectful disagreement, we create opportunities for genuine understanding, even in the face of polarization. And when things seem hard or even hopeless, there's still a way out. As F. Scott Fitzgerald famously wrote, the test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. One should, for example, be able to see that things are hopeless, yet be determined to make them otherwise. It won't always be easy. There will be times when the divide seems too wide, the disagreements too deep, far beyond preferring cats to dogs or Coke to Pepsi. But that's precisely when these skills matter most. Every time we choose curiosity over judgment, empathy over indifference, and respect over hostility, we contribute to being more connected and less polarized. If you'd like to learn more about this framework, I'll drop a link to a page where you can download some of these phrases and further resources. And who knows, the next time you encounter someone from the opposing camp in the Great Pets debate or any other divisive issue, you might find yourself curious about their perspective rather than defensive of your own. After all, in a world that often feels divided, even cats and dogs have an uncanny ability to bring people together. Thank you.
Ambreen, oh, I just want to put that picture back of the cat and the dog together because that just warms my heart. So, what a great way to end your talk, and so incredibly valuable and useful here in the United States. We're obviously in an election year that has felt like there's a year of news every single week. I know you being over in Israel, everything that's been going on, not since October 7th, but really for years and decades. And so I so value and appreciate what you presented here today. And we're going to dive a little bit more into it after Betty and Stephenie go. But let me ask you this. I know that you are an academic, and I talk a lot about the expert trap and shifting from teaching and training into thought leadership and storytelling. And we've had many, many conversations about that. And you are so thoughtful in everything that you do. So how did it feel to have to condense something like this into less than 10 minutes?
The condensing wasn't hard, but not, backing up everything by, something in the literature or something, just drawing more on personal experience as opposed to, established knowledge in the field, and trying to incorporate that with pop culture references. That was challenging for me.
How does it feel after having just presented it?
It feels different than like a traditional academic presentation. Yeah.
Okay, well, you have a big smile on your face. I'm hoping that's a good different. All right, let's bring on now to the stage Betty Graham. Betty, you ready?
I am. Thanks,
All
Carol.
right. Let me add your slides.
Okay, so imagine spending your entire career fighting for every rung on the professional ladder, only to realize you get to the top and realize you've climbed the wrong ladder. To say that was a gut punch would be an understatement. Can any of you relate to feeling this? Growing up, I was told time and time again that I would amount to nothing. And the early decisions on in my life, I kind of understand where that was coming from. And it really wasn't until this beautiful, innocent girl was brought to this world for me. I say she was my saving grace, because I realized it was no longer about me. It was about me helping her to see what's possible for her and to give her the best life possible. So I spent the next 30 years, really the last 15 of the 30 years, of fighting my way through the growth of corporate world. And I became an executive. and focused a lot on, strategic planning and leadership development and coaching, which I loved. But what I didn't realize was I lost myself in that process. I just remember looking up at the age of 50 and thinking to myself, oh my God, I've spent my entire career to get here, and I'm finally here, and I'm miserable. The last 3 to 4 years probably was the biggest struggle. And the reason for that is because I felt like I had shrunk. I no longer advocated for the people and the things that I felt were important for them. I no longer stood up for what I believed. I was emotional about everything. And it wasn't pretty. It was that ugly cry that every other time I turned around, I'm like, what is wrong with me? And the fact was, what I realized was I was at a tug of war with my values not aligning with the organization anymore. And so it took me a minute to realize that. But, early on in my life, so many times people would say, Betty, tell me a little bit about yourself. And I'd always say, oh, I'm a little class, a little sass, a little badass. And I meant that. Like, I loved it. I was full of life. I was ready for the next adventure. I was excited for what opportunities lied ahead. But that Monday morning, standing in the mirror, tears streaming down my face, I kept thinking to myself, how did I get here? How did I go from that vibrant, full of life person looking for the next wonderful adventure to this shell of myself? And that day will be forever etched in my mind, because that's the day that I resigned. And I was terrified. I was scared to death, because I'm 51 years old. I have no idea what's next. I'm terrified of failing. What if I let people down? But the interesting thing was, the thing that will stand out forever for me, more than anything else that day, was that when the decision was finally made, that overwhelming amount of peace that came over me. And I stand before you today, a year later, and I'm still working through this process, but I am finding my way back to that sassy self that I've always been. And I want to share with you, in case you're also experiencing something similar to this, the approach that I took. And of course, yes, I called it the sassy approach. I mean, how could you not, right? So S, oh, I've lost my slides. There we go. So S stands for self-awareness. Really dive deep here. Find out, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your values? What are you passionate about? Not anybody else, but you. And A stands for assertiveness. Stand up for yourself. Create boundaries. Do not be the yes person. I was the yes person. Anything and everything thrown at me. And so we've all heard this, right? I'm going to say it anyways. If it is not a hell yes, it damn well better be a hell no. S is for self-care. It's okay to take time for ourselves, to love ourselves enough to give ourselves some peace. I don't care if it is a massage, if it's meditation, if you just want to sit by yourself and reflect for 30 minutes in peace and quiet, please take time for yourself. And strength, build resilience. You are a badass, my friends. So make sure you build and develop the mental and emotional strength to face the challenges that are ahead, because there's always going to be ups and downs that we have to face. And the last but not least is you. The why is you, your unique ability. Love who you are, embrace who you are, We are all special in our own ways. So being on the other side of this, I can tell you, I realize this is a journey. Some days are harder than others. But what I want you to know is I'm finding a way to give myself grace and to love myself and accept myself for who I am. And if you're going through this, I want you to be able to do the same thing. You know, I realized this past year has been really lonely. And I would have done anything to have a community of people that were going through similar things, of women that were feeling the same pains that I was feeling. And I didn't, you know, I have a wonderful family and friend group, but I didn't want to burden them. And I didn't know if they would understand it or not. So I'm so excited to share with you, for the first time, I'm announcing that I am creating a women's community in the fall, and it's called She Is. You know, she is classy, sassy, a little badassy. I mean, how could it not be, right? And I'd love for you to join. My friends, if you're going through this and you're feeling lonely, you don't have to do this by yourself. Come join us. I will love you, embrace you, accept you for where you are with no judgment. And as I leave you today, I want you to remember your worth is not defined by others' approval. It's defined by how you love and accept yourself. So go find yourself, your sassy self, my friends. Thank you.
Well done, Betty. Wow. Now, I know you've been practicing this talk with us, as have the other women, for the past few weeks in the Thought Leader Academy. How did that feel to deliver it live?
It felt good. It felt good.
Good. Yes. Yeah, you did a great job, you know, and we had actually worked together. You came through the Thought Leader Academy initially way back in January 2023, so well over a year and a half ago, before you left the job that you were just talking about.
Yep.
And so now we went back to our summer school program to refresh your talk. And back when we originally had worked together, we did have the class, sass, and badass as kind of like the 3 lessons that you were sharing with your audience. And then we repurposed it for this talk. So can you tell us a little bit about how did it feel to share a story, a very vulnerable story? I know it's not easy for you to share it as it is for any of us sharing vulnerable stories. How did that feel?
So, you know, I think all of you ladies know, I struggled. Like I was an emotional hot mess the first time that I tried to share it. And little by little, I'm finding strength in that. And so it felt good because I don't want anybody else to go through this.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And sadly, there are so many women out there who have experienced something similar, maybe something even exactly like what you experienced, Betty, or just some crisis of confidence that they've been hit with, and they realize that they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then what do they do next? Exactly. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And thank you for offering the She Is. I love that name. She Is community. All right. So speaking of women and building trust in yourself and others, next up, we have Stephenie Hoehndorf. Stephenie, take it away.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. I don't know about you, but I remember how excited I was to start my first grown-up job. I was actually excited to get in the car and join rush hour traffic. I really wanted to make connections. I wanted to meet new people. I wanted to deliver an impact. I wanted to be part of something with people I could trust. And I was excited to forge a new professional relationship because since I was a child, the oldest child of a large family, I could see the value of the bidirectional support, nurturing, encouragement, pushing each other to grow and succeed. I still remember helping my youngest sister learn to walk and being so excited when she took her first steps on her own. And I also remember as she became older and she began giving me life-altering advice as we became adults. So she kind of teaches me to walk now. So has anybody here ever thought that they could blindly trust their colleagues? I did, and I want to tell you a little bit more about that. So in my first role, I was part of an administrative team with what seemed like really lovely people. A few months in, I was asked if I wanted to do mail service. Now, what mail service was, it was done right after lunch. We delivered mail to all of our clients, greeted them, made sure they got what they needed for the day. And when they asked if I wanted to, it was my first time being asked if I wanted to do mail. It was right after the lunch, great opportunity to stretch your legs. I bolted out of my seat, ran across the room. I was a little eager, maybe a little too eager, because I actually heard some of the admins in the room kind of snickering and giggling a little bit, but I don't mind being a little silly. So after going door to door to each customer, handing them their mail, turning around and proceeding to the next office to hand them their mail, I returned back to the admin area. They asked me if any customers had any questions or said anything, or if anything had happened. And I said, nope, all of our customers seem just fine, just fine. So I returned back to my switchboard and I continued to field calls until 5 o'clock. And as was my normal routine, I'd grab my purse and my lunchbox, and being on the 30th floor, head into an empty elevator. And by the time I got to the lobby, elevator was pretty packed, waiting for everybody to spill out. I could actually move on to the parking garage. And I remember this one day, that particular day, I walked into the parking garage and I remember putting my key into my hatchback, throwing my purse and my lunchbox into the back seat, and then sliding my hand underneath my dress so I could slide into my car. And that's when all of a sudden something didn't feel right. Something was wrong. And so I caught a glimpse of myself in the large van that was parked right next to me. And I realized that I had tucked my skirt into the back of my pantyhose at lunch before I had walked around and paraded around the whole office to deliver mail. I can laugh about it today, but I'll be honest, that day I cried my entire way home. I was humiliated. I was mortified. I was so embarrassed. I didn't think I even wanted to show my face anymore. So after a few days of reflecting on what I had done and this terrible thing I had done, I realized, my colleagues weren't even laughing with me. They were actually laughing at me. They had seen the mistake and said nothing. They were not supportive. They were not nurturing. They were not encouraging. And I certainly could no longer trust their intentions. This is a big lesson for me to learn. And this moment really had a profound impact on me and my entire career. I spent the next several decades waffling between trusting no one, which is incredibly lonely and isolating, to thinking that maybe the pantyhose saga of 1995 was a one-time instance that would never happen again. And so I would toggle over and start to overtrust people again. So I got to thinking a little bit and started researching more about networks of people, how to build relationships built on trust and empathetic support. And I really wanted to know if it even existed. Did trust even exist in the workplace? And what would the value of real trust be? And in my research, I learned that women networks are critical to a woman's professional development. Let me say that again. Women's networks are critical to a woman's professional development. I'm going to tell you why I'm using the word critical. Raise your hand if you're satisfied with the progression of your career and you're confident that you're going to be promoted in the next 5 years, and you have reduced stress levels and a strong overall sense of well-being. I don't see many hands. So did you know that women who participate in a women's network are 250%, let me say that again, 250% more likely to be satisfied with their career progression just from being part of a women's network? They're 65% more likely to receive a promotion within 5 years if they participate in a women's network. They are 25% more likely to have 25% less stress and a 35% increase in their overall well-being from participating in a women's network. Women networks are critical to a women's professional development. Women need a place to connect, to nurture, and to grow together. So have you ever heard of the mycelium network? Maybe not. It involves fungus, which we don't, well, maybe don't have great thoughts on, right? We're not talking about things that are growing in the corner of our bathrooms. It involves the fungus and mushroom layer of the nature's ecosystem. It's what actually connects all pieces of nature together underground, communicating, sharing nutrients, supporting each element of nature. Trees can share nutrients. Everything in the mycelium network really can be trusted, and it can be trusted to connect, to nurture, and to grow, regardless of its shape, its size, or the color of that nature. I recently started learning more about the mycelium, and that nurturing interconnected strength is what I realized I needed. And then as I talked to other women, I realized that they too wanted a safe place to discuss their career challenges and their opportunities, to a place to learn and to grow and to practice without judgment, a place where someone has your back and will encourage you to keep going and growing. That interconnected strength and support is what inspired me to create Hercelium, where women can connect, nurture, and grow together. At Hercelium, we use the Shroom framework. We actually have a lot of frameworks, but we use the primary Shroom framework to guide people through their own personal and professional development. Now, we don't have time to review every part of the framework today, but I did want to go through the first element of the framework. Doesn't matter who you are, what you do. The first thing you always have to know is no matter how many people have told you no, you can do what you want to do. You can take a look at what your current situation is and you can dream big. And no matter how many times somebody has told you no, you can do it. You just don't have the right advocates yet. So I want each of you to take a moment and I want you to reflect on your own careers. I want you to think to yourself, do you have a plan for your next promotion? Have you achieved your work-life balance? Are you in the role that you really want? Do you know where you're going to go next? Do you have a strong network of people you can trust? If not, I urge you to reach out to your network, to build a network, to find an alliance, and know that you can change anything you want about your future. Can't really change anything about the past, but tomorrow is always a new game. All you need is a vision of something new and a strong network of advocates who can help you connect, nurture, and grow to where you want to be. If you'd like to learn more about the importance of networking for your career growth, or would like to learn more about Hercelium and the Shroom framework, follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram. Trust us, we won't let you walk around with a wardrobe malfunction. We've got your back. Find your network and restart your growth today. Thank you.
All right. Oh, Stephenie, that was so fun. Let me take your slide. All right. Well done. I love the humor. And thank you so much for sharing that story. I think all of us can relate to some type of wardrobe malfunction. Probably so many of us with the pantyhose tucked into the back of our clothing. I feel like that has probably happened to me. I think it was like circa 1995 also, because that's when we wore pantyhose, right?
You had to wear pantyhose, yes.
I haven't worn it since. All right. So Stephenie, how did that feel? How did it feel to put together your talk, this 10-minute version of it, thinking through our framework, the opening, the closing, tying things together, your framework? What was that process like for you?
Actually, it was actually really messy at the beginning because there were so many things I wanted to say. When you told me we were going to get it down to 10 minutes, I thought, no way, I can't even accept that challenge. Those who know me personally know that I talked before I walked. And so for me, there was so much to share. Going through the process allowed me to create a very simplistic process for shepherding people through a development. And what it really did is it helped me shorten the message down to what was the most important.
Yes. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And you think about it, in that 10 minutes, you actually put a lot in there. You had the data points, the stats about how critical women's networks are. So you brought in that third party credibility. You had that great story about the pantyhose. You even touched on growing up in your family. So you talked about this idea of trust before you went into that story. You had the humor. You tied it back in the beginning. You had your call to action with your Hercelium network. So I think that we're often surprised how much we can actually put into 10 minutes. And I remember pretty much everything you did. It'd be very hard for me to remember most of it if it was 30 minutes or 45 minutes. Yeah. I don't know. So maybe all those event organizers out there we can fit in more speakers if we just give everyone 15 to 20 minutes. All right. So Ambreen, let me come back to you. So like Stephenie and Betty and the other women that we work with, you learned our signature talk canvas framework where you build your talk, whether it's 10 minutes or an hour, through Acts 1, Act 2, and then Act 3, where you're setting up what's the premise of your talk, what does the audience want, what's getting in their way, how can you help them, and then what's those next steps, that call to action for them. So what was it like for you to learn our framework, working with us, and then apply it to this talk that you just delivered?
The framework is really intuitive, I think. It's not something, anybody would just come up with. It's obviously built on a lot of time and experience. But I think it was very clear, and it was very like sequential, like the way that you teach it, and the way that you approach addressing, like making these big ideas that people have really accessible. And so I think that it was very clarifying, right? Like I've listened to the podcast for many years and followed your work and heard all of these really amazing talks, and I've always wondered, okay, like I know how to give a talk for my sort of work, like I don't know how to give a talk for your sort of work, for moving from like a very niche thing and building on my methodology and my findings and how this relates back to the literature and what I'm adding, and it's all very, very niche. And this is like, okay, how do you think really broad, and then how do we strip it down into something really, really simple that you can communicate in 10 minutes? So I think it's both simple and daunting at the same time, but I think doing it with a community of people made it possible, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I know that you've been listening to the podcast a long time. You're one of our most engaged podcast listeners. I always love getting emails from you when you've listened to an episode and it really resonated with you. So I always appreciate that. And here's the thing that I always say is that you all are so smart, so capable, so talented. I know you can put together great presentations. You've done it throughout your careers, whether it's in academia or in the workplace or for your own business or lunch and learns or conferences that you presented. I know that, but I also know so much we get stuck in our own heads and we get in our own ways and we overthink things and we get that analysis paralysis of, I don't know what to put next. I don't know what else to do. So that's what I'm hoping by actually working with us is that you get over some of those hurdles that really we just place in front of ourselves. but I know that you're more than capable of getting past. All right. So Betty, let's go back to you. So we talked a little bit about the storytelling that you did, also about the framework that you came up with, SASSY. So tell us about creating that framework and coming up with the different words that you ended up selecting for the SASSY.
So I actually have to give some of my accolades to my friend Ambreen, because that's the beauty about doing stuff in collaboration, right? Is I was struggling with that. I'm like, how do I present this so that people can connect? And so the beauty was Ambreen was so kind and generous and just reached out to me and said, let me help you. And let's collaborate. And so, that's how it came to be.
I love that you all were helping each other in the group calls with coming up with ideas for your acronyms and words that you can use, and even just thinking of the framework SASSY. And then Stephenie, what about you? So you had Shroom, obviously very much a part of mycelium and then hercelium. Where did Shroom come from?
Oh, well, Shroom really came from this idea that, so what's neat about the mycelium is where we digest on the inside, they digest on the outside through the form of the mushroom showing up underground, right? That's all connected back to that mycelium. And I felt like a lot of people like myself have kind of gotten this point in their career where they're kind of starting to go underground now and just kind of staying out of the limelight. They're just kind of stopping their progression. And I felt like the mushrooms were a great analogy for people kind of coming together, but coming together while holding someone's hand, having that trust in somebody else. Because you need somebody to be able to tell you that, you're going in the right direction, or you're not going the right direction. That little bit of validation goes a long way.
Oh, I love that. I didn't know that was the origin story of where the shroom framework came from. Let's talk about humor and cultural references, because I know that, like Stephenie, I feel like you naturally have kind of a humorous personality. I feel like your humor would come across in any presentation or talk that you gave. When you were creating this 10-minute version, were you intentional about making sure you put in humor, or did you just know that it was going to come out?
I had to be a little intentional, and I had to really, I've had some embarrassing things happen. So I really had to pick the one that probably has the most distance from today, because those are the ones that, I've gotten over a little bit, that I can laugh at myself now. So it was an intentional element, but it really, the trick was picking the one that doesn't still sting as much.
Yes, having almost 30 years of distance definitely helps for sure. All right, Ambreen, what about you? So you started off, with these kind of the compare and contrast, whether, do you like pineapple on your pizza or dogs and cats? So it was funny, had cultural references. I have a feeling that was probably different than how you usually start your academic presentations and the talks that you give at conferences. So why did you decide to go in that direction, and how did you think of those different ideas?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think so much of my experience and everyone else's experience here is like the opportunity and the privilege to do this, like in the context of this community, and being able to kind of, see, did that land, did it not land, like, in the context of our work together, of being able to practice these things in small groups and larger groups as well. But I think it was in one of the sessions with Diane where I think I specifically asked, like, so like how would that look like for me? Like, it's not that's definitely not an easy thing for me to think, okay, what's the pop culture reference here? What's the meme? What's the Giphy? What is, what fits? And so she kind of had some ideas, and I was like, okay, I think the reference she gave, it was, a commercial I didn't really remember, but it was good. Like, it was that started making me think, and then it was enough for me to, in dialogue with AI, to say, okay, like what are some references that would also span maybe, multiple, generations also, that, just to say, like, just to show in a friendlier way what polarization looks like before going into something that is a bit heavy, just to have that lightness. And so, yeah, I think also in academic work, right, it's more of like showing, not telling, and but you also kind of, you dive deep into your data and you come up and you zoom out, and so it's kind of like part of the zoom in, zoom out, I think, as it relates to broader cultural references. Like, how do you zoom out and relate to something that, regardless of people's interest in your talk, like, it resonates. Yeah.
I like that you thought of also appealing to multiple generations with your examples and using AI to get some ideas. I have used ChatGPT before to think of movie references or character references for a particular thing that maybe I wanted to talk about or a client wanted to talk about. ChatGPT is good. It will pull. Now, some of the times it's kind of really cheesy. Like, it pulls out the cheesiest and most obvious examples. So you kind of have to like have it keep digging to find something that's maybe still relatable, but not one that's been done 1,000 times. But I love that you use the AI to help you with that. All right. So Betty, we talked a little bit about vulnerability in your storytelling after you delivered your talk. And I know in the Thought Leader Academy, we talk quite a bit about vulnerability hangovers, which most of us will experience when we share a vulnerable story, whether it's something that we feel like happened 30 years ago and we share it to 10 people, or something that maybe happened more recently and we share it to a broader audience. So how did understanding that the vulnerability hangover was a thing and was likely to happen, did that help you then when it did occur?
Yes, it did. As we were practicing in our groups, I have to tell you, my first thought was, I'm not going to be able to get through this. I can't do this. I don't want people to see me as weak, right? Because that's what it is you feel weak. And so I think it was you that actually said, Carol, you're focusing on the pain that's come from that. Maybe focus on the strength that has come through because of this. And that there's, I think because there's other women out there that need to hear it, that it's not about me. It's really about trying to help somebody else get through this so that they don't go through it on their own. Yes. So that helped me immensely. And as you can tell, I mean, it's still very emotional for me. Probably always will be to some degree. But again, I had to quit thinking about how people were going to view me and more about if it could help one person, is it really worth it? And it is worth it.
Yes, I completely agree. And I still get emotional when I share a story of something that happened to me over 15 years ago. And I think that's actually a good thing because we don't want to put so much armor over ourselves and our stories and what has happened to us that we don't feel it anymore. Because I feel like feeling it not only helps us, but it then helps the audience to connect to it. And like finding that emotional heart of your story and keeping that alive within you, I think is really powerful as well. And as I say, sharing your story again in an appropriate way to an audience that has earned your vulnerability, I find very liberating to yourself to do that.
Yes.
So hopefully you found that too, Betty. All right, so let me do a round robin here. What is next for you as a speaker and a thought leader? Betty, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I will be launching She Is in October. And so I hope to be able to reach more people and help more people. And so I will be looking for opportunities to do that.
Fantastic. And Stephenie?
Thank you. Well, also we're Hercelium's launching this month as well, and we have using the framework methodology. We have 21 of our first workshops designed with unique frameworks associated with them. So we're really excited to get that started. I think the next thing is finding new avenues to reach out to women that don't necessarily have that seed of success built into their into their own development plan. I think a lot of women still out there are thinking that if I go learn these courses, everything else will fall into place. And there's a few other steps along the way. And so I'm really looking forward to finding the new women out there that really could use that help.
Love it. Ambreen, what about you? What's next for you?
Well, it's mostly academic endeavors at this point, but I think it's oftentimes the first time you try something, it's the hardest, and so having tried this and taking something that core principles that I've worked with or done bits of research about over time, and then trying to say, okay, how do I strip this down and simplify it for in 10 minutes and that's relevant to someone in this sort of talk. And so I think it's perhaps finding other opportunities to try to do that again and see how it goes.
Well, I hope you do. And for those of you watching and listening, make sure to connect with all three of these women on LinkedIn. You can find their profiles right here on the LinkedIn event and also on the show notes page for this. And also wanted to let you know that we do have enrollment open right now for the Thought Leader Academy. We work together with you both one-on-one and in a small group, just like these women did, to create your signature talk, develop your thought leadership ideas, practice your delivery, and then present it live on our LinkedIn live show, as well as learn the business of speaking. So if you would like to join us, you get all the details at speakingyourbrand.com/academy. Again, that's speakingyourbrand.com/academy. And 2 days from now, on August 1st, you will get a chance to hear from our second group of Thought Leader Academy clients who will be presenting their version of their 10-minute version of their signature talk. So make sure to join us as well. You can find that event under Diane Diaz's profile on LinkedIn because she's going to be hosting that one. Until next time, thanks for watching.
Thank you.